My family laughed and said I wasn't real family at a BBQ. So I cut off their $6,500 slush fund and let my brother's secret debt destroy them. My father looked me dead in the eye at a crowded family barbecue, smirked, and told me I wasn't actually part of the family. So, I walked away, froze the joint bank account I had been single-handedly funding for years, and let the crushing weight of my golden child brother's secret financial ruin pull them all under. I'm Julian. I'm 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my role in my family wasn't son or brother. It was the unofficial, unpaid, 24/7 IT guy, financial advisor, and emergency repairman. It happened so gradually that I didn't even notice I'd been hired for the job. I work as a freelance UX, UI designer. I'm incredibly good at what I do, and my income has grown exponentially over the last few years. But in my family, my success wasn't celebrated, it was simply viewed as a higher capacity to solve their endless problems. It all shattered on a sticky, late August Saturday in Austin. The air was thick with humidity, the smell of freshly cut grass, and the heavy scent of charcoal. My dad, Arthur, lived for these family get-togethers. Or rather, he loved the theatrical performance of them. He'd stand by the grill, silver tongs in one hand, an ice-cold beer in the other, holding court like some kind of suburban dictator. I arrived that afternoon carrying a $60 bottle of red wine apiece offering, because things had been uniquely tense lately. I stepped onto the back patio, and the usual suffocating scene unfolded. My dad gave me a curt, dismissive nod. My mom, Eleanor, offered a tight, fleeting smile before immediately turning her back to me to continue her conversation. My younger brother, Marcus the undisputed golden child, was slouched in a patio chair, aggressively scrolling on his phone, not even bothering to look up. His wife, Chloe, gave a pathetic little half-wave. It was the same chilling, isolating reception I always received. But like the good, conditioned scapegoat I told myself to just try harder. I found a small opening in the conversation. Everyone was buzzing about the upcoming family trip to a beachfront rental down in Florida. I'd been hearing about this trip for 6 weeks. I'd seen the endless links and photos of the rental that my mom kept spamming in the family group chat. I saw my chance to connect, to be part of the shared excitement. I honestly can't wait for our vacation, I said, pitching my voice to sound casual and upbeat. That beach looks absolutely incredible. The chatter died instantly. A bizarre, heavy silence crashed down over the patio, broken only by the loud sizzle of burgers on the grill. My dad slowly turned from the grill, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. It was a look I knew intimately. It was the look that always preceded the punchline, and I was always the punchline. He let out a short, sharp, barking laugh. "It's only for family, Julian," he said. His voice was booming, easily loud enough for the neighbors 3 houses down to hear. "Without you." The words hung in the humid Texas air for an agonizing second. And then, the laughter started. It wasn't an awkward chuckle. It was a loud, rolling, unified wave of laughter. Marcus snorted loudly, finally looking up from his phone with a vicious grin. My uncle slapped his knee. Even my mom smiled a brittle, transparent smile, as if my public humiliation was just a clever, harmless little joke. Not a single person defended me. No one said, "Arthur, that's out of line." They just laughed at me. In that exact fraction of a second, something inside of me didn't break. It just clicked into permanent place. All the grueling years of feeling like an outsider, the person they only ever called when a router was broken or a bill needed paying, solidified into one cold, undeniable realization. They weren't joking. He meant it. I wasn't family. I was a utility. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't throw a tantrum. I just looked at my dad, held his mocking gaze, and nodded slowly. "Got it," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady, completely devoid of emotion. I gently placed the unopened bottle of expensive wine on the patio table, my final, useless offering to a family that despised me. Then I turned around, walked back through the sliding glass doors, straight through the house, out the front door, and got into my car. I didn't look back. The sound of their echoing laughter followed me all the way to the driveway. To truly understand why that specific moment was the catalyst for burning my entire family to the ground, you have to understand the 1,000 little cuts that came before it. You have to understand the family emergency fund. It was my mother's brilliant idea 3 years ago. A joint savings account where we would all theoretically contribute a little each month for a rainy day. She had pitched it brightly. "You never know when someone might need sudden help, Julian." It sounded completely reasonable. But somehow, my little bit was always the biggest. "Julian, your freelance salary is the most stable," she would reason, weaponizing my hard work. "It only makes sense for you to be the main contributor. It's for the family." I agreed because I desperately wanted to be a good son. I wanted to believe in this fantasy of us as a unit. I set up an automatic transfer. Every single month, a significant chunk of my income vanished into that account, an account my mother conveniently held a debit card for. I viewed it as an investment in my family's security. I never, in my wildest nightmares, imagined it was actually a slush fund, and that I was the only idiot funding it. Then there were the manufactured emergencies. A few months prior, we were all out for my mother's birthday dinner at a high-end steakhouse. When the check arrived, my mom made a massive, theatrical show of patting her designer purse. "Oh dear," she sighed dramatically. "I must have left my cards on the kitchen counter." My dad's card was conveniently declined when the waiter ran it. Marcus just shrugged, smirking, saying he was tight on cash this week. All eyes turned to me. The expectation was heavy and silent. So, I paid the entire bill. Over $450. They offered hollow thanks. The very next morning, my mom posted a massive family photo from the dinner on Facebook. Everyone was in it, tagged, smiling, looking like the perfect family. Except me. I was the one holding the camera. My boyfriend, Noah, saw the toxic dynamic long before I had the courage to admit it. We'd been together for 2.5 years. Noah is calm, deeply logical, and comes from a family that actually enjoys each other's company. They would call him just to chat about a movie they saw or a funny thing the dog did. It was a completely foreign concept to me. We'd be at our apartment enjoying a quiet Friday evening, and my phone would buzz. It would be a text from my mom: "The garbage disposal is making a weird grinding noise. Come fix it." Or a call from Marcus: "Hey, can you redesign my entire resume tonight? I need it for a job fair tomorrow morning." One evening, after I had spent an hour and a half on the phone walking my dad through how to connect his new smart TV to the Wi-Fi, Noah finally intervened. We were sitting on the couch, the TV on mute. "You realize they only ever call you when something is broken or they need money, right?" Noah asked. His tone was incredibly soft, not accusatory, just deeply sad for me. I immediately got defensive. "It's a strange, pathetic instinct, the way you blindly protect the very people who are bleeding you dry." "That's not true," I snapped, a little too quickly. "They're just not big on small talk. You don't get it, Noah. That's just how my family operates." "I get that they rely on you, Julian," he countered, picking his words with surgical precision. "But do they support you? When was the last time your dad called just to ask how your massive UI project was going? When was the last time your mom remembered the name of that corporate client you were so stressed about?" I sat there in the dim light of our living room. I didn't have an answer. My mind raced frantically, trying to dig up just one single example to prove him wrong. I came up completely empty. The silence in the room was deafening. He was right. My phone was a one-way hotline for their demands, never a line for connection. The real turning point, the event that actively set the stage for the barbecue disaster, was a 3-day weekend trip Noah and I took to a secluded cabin in the Berkshires. It was his idea. He saw how visibly deteriorating my mental health was, constantly tethered to my phone, flinching every time it vibrated, waiting for the next family crisis. "Let's just go," Noah had pleaded. "Turn off our phones, just for 72 hours. Disconnect." The mere idea was terrifying to me. Turning off my phone felt like an act of treason. What if their water heater bursts? What if mom needs a ride to the doctor? I panicked. But Noah was persistent, and a small, exhausted part of my soul was desperate for the escape. So, we went. It was absolute bliss. We hiked through dense, quiet pine forests. We ate greasy food at a small local diner. We read books by a crackling fireplace. For the first time in over a decade, my shoulders dropped away from my ears. On our last day, feeling genuinely happy, I posted a single photo on my Instagram, a picture of 2 steaming mugs of coffee on a wooden railing overlooking a mountain valley. I didn't tag anyone. I just captioned it, "Much needed peace." By the time we were driving back to civilization, I turned my phone back on. It immediately began to explode. It was as if I had committed a cardinal sin. The first text was from Marcus in the family group chat. A simple, passive-aggressive, "Wow, must be nice to just vanish." Then my mom. A private text barrage. "I saw your picture. I'm glad you're having fun. I just wish you'd told us you were going away. I was worried sick." Worried? I was a 28-year-old grown man. But the final blow was another text from her a few hours later. It was an absolute masterclass in emotional terrorism. "We have always been there for you, Julian. We sacrificed our youth to give you everything. But I guess when you finally get a little time off, you just run away and hide like we don't even exist. It physically hurts to feel so easily forgotten by my own flesh and blood." The guilt hit me like a physical punch to the gut. It was suffocating. My 3 days of hard-won peace were instantly vaporized, replaced by that familiar, churning, nauseating anxiety. I showed the text to Noah. He just shook his head, his knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. "Do you see it now?" he asked quietly over the hum of the engine. "Your time is only valuable to them when it's being spent serving them. Your happiness is an inconvenience to their needs." That was the exact moment I decided I had to go to the barbecue that following weekend. I had to prove her wrong. I would show up. I would be the perfect, attentive, subservient son. I'd bring the expensive wine. I was walking willingly into the lion's den, arrogantly believing I could tame them with a smile and a bottle of Pinot Noir. I didn't realize I wasn't the lion tamer. I was the meal. Update 1. For exactly 5 days after I walked out of that barbecue, there was absolute silence. A loud, ringing, oppressive silence. No angry phone calls, no manipulative text demanding I apologize for my dramatic exit. It was deeply unsettling. They were giving me the silent treatment, one of their absolute favorite psychological weapons. Usually, I'd break within 48 hours, crawling back with apologies. But this time was fundamentally different. I wasn't just waiting them out. I was regrouping. The cold, hard, diamond-like clarity from that patio hadn't faded. It had settled deep into my bone marrow. On the 5th day, a Thursday, I was deep into coding a wireframe at my desk when an email notification popped up on my secondary monitor. It was from my bank. An automated alert I'd set up years ago and completely forgotten about. Subject: unusual activity on joint savings account ending in 8,842. My heart hammered aggressively against my ribs. I clicked it open. A withdrawal of $6,500 has been attempted via debit card by Eleanor last name. This transaction exceeds the daily ATM, point of sale limit. Please contact us immediately if you suspect fraudulent activity. $6,500. Not a small sum. Not a car repair sum. There had been no phone call. End event. No text saying, "Hey Julian, we have a massive, life-altering emergency and we need to use the fund." Just a silent, cowardly attempt to drain a massive amount of money from an account that I was 99% responsible for funding. The white-hot rage that I had suppressed on that patio came roaring back to life. But it was entirely different now. It wasn't the frantic anger of a hurt child. It was sharp, violently focused, and ice-cold. This wasn't just about emotional disrespect anymore. This was a financial violation. They literally viewed me as a walking ATM, an open line of credit with zero oversight. I picked up my phone. My hand was perfectly steady. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my father. I called the 1-800 number on the back of my debit card. "Hi," I said to the customer service rep, my voice completely deadpan. "I need to report a compromised card for my joint savings account and have the entire account frozen immediately." "Certainly, sir. Can I ask if this is related to a fraudulent transaction?" the rep asked. I paused. I tasted the word in my mouth. It tasted exactly like freedom. "No," I replied, "it's not fraud. I am the primary funder of this account, and I simply do not authorize any further use of the debit card by the secondary account holder, ever." It took less than 5 minutes. The card was permanently canceled. The account was locked down tight. But I wasn't quite finished. While still on the phone, I logged into my online banking portal. I navigated to the account settings. There was a small text field labeled account nickname. For 3 years, it had cheerfully read, "Family Emergency Fund." My cursor blinked over the words. With a few aggressive taps of my mechanical keyboard, I deleted them. In their place, I typed 2 words. 2 words that summarized everything I was feeling. 2 words that were a direct, undeniable reply to my father's laughter at the barbecue. "Fund yourselves." I hit save. The UI updated instantaneously. I knew my mom would be getting a push notification that her massive transaction was declined, and when she frantically logged into the app to see why, she would see that new name staring back at her. A digital slap across the face. It didn't take long. Less than 45 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate off my desk. A text from my mom. "What did you do? The card is declining. I need that money right now, Julian." Then another. "Julian, this isn't funny. Stop throwing a tantrum and call me now." Then a text from my dad. "Your mother is in hysterics. Whatever sick game you're playing, stop it. You are part of this family and you have financial responsibilities to us." Oh, the absolute blinding irony. Now I was family. Now that the money trough was cut off, I was suddenly blood again. I took a screenshot of the new account name Fund Yourselves and sent the image directly to the family group chat without a single word of text. Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, grabbed my jacket, and went for a long walk to get a coffee. The frantic buzzing in my pocket felt like the death rattle of a parasitic relationship I should have severed a decade ago. The very next day, my family escalated the situation in a way I could never have mathematically predicted. They decided to bring their circus to my professional turf. I work out of a high-end tech hub and co-working space in downtown Austin. It's a massive, open-plan office, incredibly professional, full of other designers, software engineers and venture capitalists. It's my absolute sanctuary. The one place in the world where I have complete control, where I am respected for my talent, or so I thought. I was in the middle of a critical Zoom video call with a major client when I saw her in my peripheral vision. My mother, Eleanor, marching aggressively through the front floor to ceiling glass doors. She didn't bother signing in at the security desk. She just blew past the receptionist, her eyes scanning the sprawling room like a starving hawk until they locked onto me. My client was in the middle of explaining a complex back-end database integration when my mother suddenly appeared at the side of my desk, practically vibrating with rage. "Julian," she demanded, her voice loud, shrill, and trembling with entirely manufactured emotion. "We need to talk. Right now." Every single head in the immediate vicinity snapped toward us. My face flushed burning hot with a sickening cocktail of shock and deep professional humiliation. "Mom," I hissed, muting my microphone and turning the webcam slightly away. "I am on a live call. I am working. You cannot be here." "I don't care about your little computer work," she declared, her volume dramatically rising. Now, she was actively performing for the entire office. "I am your mother, and you are treating your own flesh and blood, with such horrific cruelty." I quickly typed a frantic apology in the Zoom chat, killed the video feed, and ripped off my headset. "Mom, please," I begged in a furious whisper. "This is my workplace. Let's go outside right now." "No," she wailed. I could actually see her eyes darting around the room, making sure she had a captive audience. "I will not be hidden away. I want everyone in this room to know exactly what kind of son you are. A son who abandons his family in their darkest hour of need. A son who would rather watch his own parents suffer on the street than part with a single dollar of his precious money." People were openly staring now. The ambient noise of typing and quiet chatter had completely died. My colleague Sarah, who sat at the desk across from me, was staring with her mouth slightly open in horror. This was a waking nightmare. This was my toxic personal life violently bleeding into my pristine professional one. Instead of cowering, instead of letting the familiar shame swallow me whole, that cold, hard clarity from the barbecue kicked in again. It coated my spine in steel. I stood up slowly, my ergonomic chair scraped loudly against the polished concrete floor. I looked her directly in the eyes. I didn't shrink. I towered over her. "You attempted to secretly withdraw $6,500 from my bank account yesterday without so much as a text message," I said. My voice was low, heavily modulated, and completely devoid of fear. "That is not a single dollar, and this is absolutely not the place to discuss your attempted theft. It was for a life or death emergency." She sobbed, dramatically clutching her pearl necklace. "Then you should have had the basic respect to tell me what the emergency was before trying to rob me," I replied coldly. "Now, you have exactly two choices. You can either turn around and walk out of this building right now, or I will have building security physically drag you out. Make your choice. You have 5 seconds." For a split second, she looked utterly paralyzed. She had completely expected me to crumble under the intense public pressure. She thought I would do anything, pay any amount of money, to make the public scene stop. She never expected me to call her bluff in front of an audience. Her eyes darted around the room again, seeking validation. But this time, the faces watching her weren't sympathetic. They were disgusted, awkward, and disturbed by her unhinged behavior. The performance had catastrophically failed. Her face instantly hardened. The fake tears vanished as quickly as they had appeared, replaced by a look of pure venom. "You will deeply regret this, Julian," she spat, her voice dropping to a demonic whisper. Then she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving a stunned, heavy silence in her wake. I just stood there for a moment, my heart pounding so hard it physically hurt my ribs. Sarah gave me a small, incredibly supportive nod from across the desk. I took a deep, shaky breath, sat back down, unmuted my mic, and apologized to my client, claiming a minor building security issue. But I couldn't focus. My sanctuary had been deeply violated. The message was crystal clear. There were absolutely no boundaries they wouldn't cross to break me. Update 2. I left the tech hub early that day, my mind absolutely reeling. I just wanted to go home, lock the deadbolt, and feel safe in my own space. I walked up to the door of my apartment, slid my key into the lock, and felt my blood run ice cold. The door was already unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, my mind racing with thoughts of a break-in. And there they were. My father, Arthur, my mother, Eleanor, and my brother, Marcus. They were inside my living room, inside my home. Marcus was aggressively lounging on my expensive sofa, his dirty sneakers resting on my glass coffee table, scrolling on his phone as if he owned the real estate. My parents were standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, arms crossed defensively like a tribunal waiting for the accused prisoner to arrive. "How the hell did you get in here?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous, vibrating whisper. "Your mother has kept a spare key for 2 years. My father boomed, his tone dripping with unearned authority. "For emergencies." "This is not an emergency," I shot back, the adrenaline flooding my system. "This is literal breaking and entering. Get the hell out of my apartment right now." My father took a menacing step toward me, his face turning a blotchy red. "Watch your damn tone, boy," he snarled. "We are still your parents. You will show us the respect we are owed. Then start acting like parents." The words violently ripped out of my throat before I could stop them. Parents do not invade their adult son's home. Parents do not humiliate their son in front of his entire family at a barbecue. And they certainly do not try to sneak almost 7 grand out of his bank account like common thieves. It was for the family. My mother cried out, immediately starting up the fake waterworks again. Marcus. Marcus is in some terrible trouble, Julian. He desperately needed our help. Finally, a tiny sliver of the actual truth. I slowly looked over at my brother. He didn't even have the basic human decency to look ashamed. He just kept his eyes glued to his iPhone screen, chewing his gum loudly. What kind of trouble costs exactly $6,500, Marcus? I asked him directly, stepping toward the couch. He just shrugged lazily. Stuff. My dad stepped directly into my line of sight, aggressively pointing a thick finger at my chest. This is all your fault. You've changed completely ever since you started dating him. He practically spat Noah's name like it was a slur. He's been putting these poisonous, selfish ideas into your head, turning you against your own blood. That was the absolute final straw. They could attack me, they could use me, they could humiliate me in public, but they were absolutely not going to touch Noah. Leave Noah out of your delusional narrative, I said. My voice was dangerously low, a lethal calm settling over me. Noah is more of a family to me than any of you have ever been in 28 years. Now, I am not going to say it a third time. Get out of my house, or I am dialing 911 and having you all arrested for trespassing. I walked over to the front door and yanked it open, holding it wide, a silent, unmovable command. My mother looked at me, her face a twisting mask of disbelief, fury, and panic. You are making the biggest mistake of your miserable life, Julian. You are going to be completely alone in this world. And when you inevitably fail and come crawling back to us, do not expect us to be here to catch you. Don't worry, I said, staring completely dead-eyed into her soul. I would rather hit the concrete. They filed out one by one, their shoulders stiff with furious indignation. My father intentionally bumped his shoulder violently against mine as he passed. I didn't flinch an inch. I just slammed the door behind them, engaged the deadbolt, fastened the chain, and leaned against the wood, my entire body violently shaking with adrenaline. Later that evening, as Noah and I were physically unscrewing the locks on my door to replace them with heavy-duty smart locks, he looked at me, his eyes full of sorrow. I am so unbelievably sorry you're going through this, Julian. I shook my head, wiping sweat from my forehead. Don't be. This is exactly the violently painful wake-up call I needed. I pulled out my phone and opened a hidden folder. It was a folder Noah had been quietly and meticulously compiling for the past year. Screenshots of every manipulative text, audio recordings of unhinged voicemails, a detailed spreadsheet log of every single emergency I had financially bailed them out of. They think this is just a petty family dispute, I said, a new, dark determination hardening my voice. They're about to find out it's a legal matter. And I have all the receipts. And, in the agonizing days that followed the home invasion, the silence was replaced by a relentless, low-grade campaign of harassment. Blocked numbers would call my phone at 3 a.m. Anonymous, guilt-tripping emails would flood my professional inbox. It was psychological warfare designed to exhaust me into compliance. I felt incredibly isolated. Then, a name suddenly popped into my head. A name I hadn't thought about in over a decade. Aunt Vivian. Aunt Vivian was my mother's older sister, the officially designated black sheep of the family. The narrative I'd been spoon-fed my entire life was that Vivian was a selfish, greedy, unreliable monster. She'd supposedly had a massive falling out with my mother over some vague inheritance issue 12 years ago and had been excommunicated. We only ever saw her at major funerals, where she would stand in the back, keep a polite, icy distance, and leave before the reception. My mother always spoke of her with a venomous mix of pity and absolute contempt. But now, I was the one on the chopping block, and I started to seriously wonder what Vivian's actual side of the story was. Fueled by a mix of desperation and burning curiosity, I tracked down her phone number online. My finger hovered over the call button for 3 agonizing minutes. What if she hung up on me? What if she was exactly the monster my mother claimed? I took a deep breath and pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was crisp, sharp, and highly professional. Aunt Vivian? I said, my voice cracking slightly. It's Julian, your nephew. There was a profound pause on the other end of the line. I held my breath, bracing for the dial tone. Instead, I heard a long, soft sigh. Julian, she said, and her entire demeanor softened instantly. I was wondering when you might finally make this call. I'm honestly surprised it took this long. You were? Let me guess, she said, a wry, knowing tone entering her voice. Your mother tried to pull a massive financial fast one on you. You finally stood up for yourself, pushed back, and now you are public enemy number one. They're probably telling everyone you've gone crazy. The surgical accuracy was so terrifyingly validating it felt like she'd been living in my walls. How did you know? Because, Julian, Your mother has been running the exact same play from the exact same diseased playbook for 35 years, Vivian said, a deep, weary resignation in her voice. I was just the first person who refused to play her sick game. Look, this isn't a conversation for an unsecure phone line. Can you come over to my house tonight? There's something highly specific I think you need to see. Aunt Vivian lived in a beautiful, meticulously tidy mid-century home on the wealthy side of town. When she opened the door, her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and completely devoid of the chaotic madness that lived in my mother's eyes. She led me into her home office, where a massive, heavily stuffed accordion file sat squarely on her mahogany desk. The label on it, written in faded black Sharpie, just read, Eleanor. I started compiling this immediately after our big falling out, Vivian explained, pouring us both a glass of water, purely for my own legal and mental protection. I figured one day, I might need hard evidence to prove to myself that I wasn't the crazy one. She flipped the file open. My jaw practically unhinged. It was a terrifyingly meticulous, chronological record of my mother's financial cons and emotional manipulations going back 2 decades. There were photocopies of bounced checks, bizarre IOUs scrawled on diner napkins that were never honored, printouts of frantic emails filled with elaborate sob stories about sudden, life-threatening expenses. There was a specific bank transfer receipt for a $4,200 loan Vivian gave my mother to pay for a critically collapsed roof. Attached to it was a printed Facebook photo of my parents on a 2-week luxury cruise in the Bahamas, dated exactly 3 weeks after the loan cleared. There was a desperate plea for money to cover a mysterious medical emergency for my dad, which Vivian later documented was actually an elective hair transplant procedure. It was a horrifying history of pathological lies and deceit, all heavily documented. She tried to tell the entire family that I owed her money from our parents' inheritance. Vivian said, her voice tight with decades of unresolved anger. She claimed I'd legally stolen more than my fair share. It was a complete, fabricated lie designed solely to guilt me into paying off one of Marcus's idiotic, doomed startup ventures. When I flatly refused and showed her the legal probate paperwork to prove she was lying, she cut me off completely. She told everyone I was a thief. Then, Vivian pulled out the final, most recent set of papers. They were heavily redacted bank statements from an account I didn't recognize. This, she said, tapping a yellow highlighted section with a manicured fingernail, is exactly why I knew you'd call me this week. Vivian had, through a high-level friend who worked in private wealth management, managed to get a terrifying glimpse into Marcus's current situation. The papers showed a catastrophic series of massive, desperate cash withdrawals. He's in incredibly deep, Julian, Vivian said quietly, the gravity of the situation filling the room. Underground gambling debts. Sports betting. It looks like he owes some very serious, very dangerous people a lot of money. And his absolute final deadline to pay them off was last Friday. Everything instantly clicked into place with sickening clarity. The sudden urgency. The exact figure of $6,500. The sheer, unhinged panic when I froze the account. The home invasion. It wasn't for a vague family emergency. It was to literally bail the golden child out from a violent mess of his own making. A mess my parents had been desperately, pathetically trying to cover up. They weren't trying to save the family. I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. They were actively enabling his addiction. And they were going to use my hard-earned money to do it. And they would have happily let you believe you were the selfish villain for the rest of your natural life if you hadn't stopped them, Vivian finished, closing the file. I sat there staring at the manila folder. This wasn't just a record of deceit. It was my absolute validation. Proof that I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't crazy. I was just the latest bleeding target in a long, well-established lineage of victims. Vivian silently passed me a box of tissues. I hadn't even realized that hot tears were streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness or grief. They were tears of pure, unadulterated, radioactive rage. And I knew exactly how I was going to weaponize it. Update 3. My family's next move was simultaneously their most cunning and incredibly stupid miscalculation. They learned from a nosy, gossiping former neighbor of mine that I had a massive, career-defining meeting scheduled for that Wednesday. I had been aggressively pitching a massive UI/UX rebranding project to Sterling Vanguard, a massive, highly respected tech investment firm. After months of grueling back and forth, I had finally landed a private lunch meeting with the CEO himself, Mr. Sterling. If this lunch went well, it would mean a multi-year contract, the kind of money and prestige that would elevate my freelance business into an actual agency. My family saw this meeting not as a milestone to celebrate, but as a point of maximum leverage. They figured, correctly, that I would absolutely abhor a public scene in front of such a critical potential client. They arrogantly believed that my fear of professional ruin would be the weapon that finally forced me to hand over the $6,500. The lunch was at a notoriously high-end, extremely quiet Italian restaurant in downtown Austin, classy, hushed, and very public. I arrived 20 minutes early, My leather portfolio case in hand, my heart a nervous drum against my ribs, Mr. Sterling arrived precisely on time. He was an intimidating older gentleman, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with a firm handshake and piercing eyes that didn't miss a single micro-expression. We made polite industry small talk. We ordered our sparkling water. I was just reaching for the zipper of my case to begin the pitch presentation when I saw them out of the corner of my eye. My father, my mother, and Marcus. They walked through the velvet-roped entrance of the restaurant and made a direct, aggressive beeline for our corner booth. My blood instantly turned to freon. It was happening again, but this time, the stakes were infinitely higher. My mother led the charge, her face twisted into a carefully crafted, Oscar-worthy mask of maternal sorrow. "Julian," she gasped, her voice pitched just loud enough to make the three nearest tables stop eating and stare. "Thank God we finally found you. We have been worried sick about you." Mr. Sterling slowly lowered his water glass, looking from her to me, his thick eyebrows furrowed in deep confusion. "Mom, Dad. What exactly are you doing here?" I said. My voice was dangerously calm. I didn't break eye contact with her. "We are here for our son," my father boomed, stepping forward and physically looming over the table. He then turned his attention directly to Mr. Sterling, putting on a sickeningly polite face. "I am so incredibly sorry to interrupt your business lunch, sir. I'm Arthur. This is my wife, Eleanor, and our other son, Marcus. We are just a family going through a deeply tragic time. Our son here," he gestured disgustingly at me, "has suffered some sort of mental break and decided to completely cut us off over a minor financial misunderstanding." My mother chimed in right on cue, dabbing her perfectly dry eyes with a silk tissue. "He has complete control of our family's emergency savings fund, and he is cruelly refusing to release the funds. His own brother is in desperate medical trouble, and Julian just doesn't care if we lose everything." They had me completely cornered. In their twisted, narcissistic minds, there were only two possible outcomes here. Either I would publicly cave, promise them the money right there to make them leave and save face, or I would lose my temper, scream at them, cause a massive scene, and completely destroy my own career in front of the CEO. They genuinely thought they had executed the perfect checkmate. I looked up at their smug, expectant faces. I saw Marcus actually smirking behind my father's broad shoulder. They thought they knew my programming. They thought I was still the terrified little boy who would do anything to keep the peace. But they didn't know about the thick accordion file currently sitting inside my leather briefcase. They didn't know about Aunt Vivian. And they fundamentally didn't understand that I was done playing the victim in their sick game. I took a slow, deep breath, looked Mr. Sterling straight in the eye, and spoke with absolute, chilling authority. "Mr. Sterling, I sincerely apologize for this absurd interruption. This is absolutely not a small misunderstanding. This is a calculated, malicious ambush by people attempting to extort me. And since my family has arrogantly decided to make this a public business matter, I think it's only fair that we discuss it with total, brutal transparency." I reached down, unzipped my briefcase, and pulled out Vivian's file. I slammed the thick accordion folder onto the crisp white tablecloth. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud that literally echoed in the suddenly dead silent restaurant. My parents' confident expressions instantly faltered. Marcus's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of sudden, panicked confusion. They stared at the file as if I had just placed a live hand grenade on the table. As I was saying, I continued, my voice projecting clearly, addressing Mr. Sterling but ensuring my family heard every single syllable. "This isn't about a family emergency fund. It is about a documented, 15-year pattern of severe financial fraud and emotional manipulation." I flipped the file open. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shed a tear. I became a cold, clinical narrator laying out undeniable facts. "Exhibit A," I said, sliding a photocopy of a bank statement across the table toward my mother. "A desperate request for $4,200 for a collapsed roof in 2011. Followed immediately by, I slid a glossy travel itinerary next to it, and a 2-week luxury Caribbean cruise taken by my parents exactly 1 month later, funded by that exact stolen money. My mother physically recoiled, gasping loudly, You can't, where did you?" "Exhibit B," I went on, completely ignoring her stammering. "A massive series of bounced checks and unpaid thousands to my Aunt Vivian. The very same aunt my mother told the entire family had stolen her inheritance, leading to a decade-long smear campaign. The actual truth is, my aunt simply refused to keep funding my brother's failed, idiotic business ventures." I looked directly at Marcus, who now looked like he was going to physically vomit. My father desperately tried to interrupt, his face purple with rage. "Now see here, you little punk, this is a private family matter. This has nothing to do with. You explicitly made it a public matter when you walked up to my table and tried to humiliate me in front of my client." I countered sharply, my voice finally cracking like a whip. "You brought my professional career into this, now we are going to finish it." I saved the absolute worst for last. I pulled out the final, redacted documents Vivian had acquired. The statements from the underground lenders. And finally, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper, the real reason for this pathetic, dramatic performance today. The $6,500 you so desperately tried to steal from me last week. I looked from my mother's ghost pale face to my father's clenched, trembling jaw. It wasn't for a medical bill, it wasn't to save the house. It was to pay off a massive portion of my brother's illegal sports gambling debts. Debts he accrued with violent loan sharks because you two have actively enabled his pathetic, irresponsible behavior his entire life, using money stolen from anyone you could manipulate to clean up his messes. The silence in the restaurant was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. My family was completely, utterly paralyzed. They had no script for this. No prepared, crying response for the cold, hard, physically documented truth being aired in public. I slowly turned to Mr. Sterling. His face was entirely unreadable, a mask of corporate stoicism. But his eyes, which had been watching me with intense calculation, now shifted to my family. He looked at them one by one, his expression morphing into one of profound, utter disgust. So, you see, sir, I concluded, calmly closing the file and resting my hands on top of it. I am not refusing to help my family. I am refusing to be their financial hostage. I am refusing to fund a lifestyle of deceit and enable a severe gambling addiction that is clearly tearing them apart. The bank account was renamed Fund Yourselves because their toxic debts are no longer my responsibility. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 28 years. I had laid everything bare. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so violently, it was almost a physical force pushing them away. They were exposed, stripped naked of their lies, right in the middle of a fancy restaurant, right in front of the exact man they thought would be my ultimate undoing. My mother opened her mouth, but literally no sound came out. My father just stared at the table, his chest heaving. For the first time in my entire life, I saw them for what they truly were. Not powerful, terrifying tyrants, but pathetic, frightened, hollow people whose only weapon had just been permanently confiscated, and it was the most intoxicatingly liberating feeling in the world. The fallout from the restaurant was immediate and catastrophic for them. They literally turned around and walked out without saying another word. A trio of shame-faced ghosts shuffling past gawking diners. Mr. Sterling sat in silence for a long moment. He slowly picked up his water glass, took a sip, looked at me, and nodded once. Your ability to remain composed and meticulously document a crisis under extreme duress is exactly the kind of temperament I want managing my firm's user architecture. Let's review the contract. He signed the deal that afternoon. My family's malicious little stunt had backfired in the most spectacular, lucrative way possible. But I knew they wouldn't just give up. Toxic people don't learn from their mistakes, they just change their tactics. 2 days later, I received a call from the director of my co-working space. An anonymous HR complaint had been filed against me, accusing me of creating a hostile work environment, harassing female co-workers, and conducting unethical, illegal business practices on the premises. They were forced to launch an internal investigation. My building access was temporarily suspended. I felt the ground momentarily fall out from under me. This was a direct, vicious attack on my livelihood. I immediately called the lawyer Aunt Vivian had recommended, a ruthless, brilliant woman named Miss Vance. Anonymous? Miss Vance scoffed over the phone. I highly doubt it. Let me make a call. She hired a forensic IT specialist. It took him less than 24 hours to trace the IP address of the complaint. It had been submitted from a public computer in the main library of the state university, the exact same university my brother Marcus was supposedly attending part-time. It was a smoking gun. Miss Vance's retaliation was swift, legal, and utterly brutal. She drafted a cease and desist letter so legally airtight and terrifying it belonged in a museum. It detailed every single instance of harassment, from the attempted bank fraud to the home invasion, the restaurant ambush, and the defamatory corporate complaint. It made it explicitly clear that any further contact, direct or indirect, would immediately result in a massive civil lawsuit for defamation and a permanent restraining order. She sent the letter via certified mail, along with a copy of the IT trace report, directly to my parents' house. We used their own tactics, the law, hard evidence, and undeniable facts to completely crush them. It wasn't about petty revenge anymore. It was about building a legal wall so incredibly high they could never, ever climb over it again. Update 4. A few days after the cease and desist was delivered, my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer it. Miss Vance had strictly advised against any direct contact. But something deep inside my gut told me I needed to take this one, final call. To hear it end. Her voice was entirely different. The shrill, theatrical, demanding tone was completely gone. In its place was something hollow, raspy, and utterly defeated. Julian, she said, her voice impossibly small. Hello, Eleanor, I replied, intentionally using her first name. My voice was a flat line. There was a long, agonizing pause. I could hear her ragged breathing on the other end of the line. Your father. She began, instantly falling back on old, manipulative habits. He's not well, Julian. His heart. The stress of all this legal paperwork. I advise him to see a cardiologist. Then, I said, offering absolutely zero emotional entry point. I would not be drawn into the maze. We got the letter from your lawyer, she continued, her voice finally cracking, shedding the illusion. A restraining order, Julian? A lawsuit? Is that really what it's come to? After everything we did for you? That college savings fund we started for you when you were a baby. The college fund you secretly cashed out in 2014 to renovate the kitchen with granite countertops? I asked calmly. It was another sickening detail Vivian's file had revealed. The dead silence on her end was my absolute confirmation. We just wanted what was best for our family, she whispered. It was the last, desperate, pathetic lie of a woman who had completely run out of ammunition. No, I said, and the word landed with finality. You wanted what was best for you, and for Marcus. You wanted an obedient scapegoat who would be your endless financial safety net, no matter the psychological cost to him. I am no longer accepting that position. I could hear her actually start to cry, and for the first time in my life, I think the tears might have been real. It was the sound of a toxic empire she had built on lies finally collapsing on top of her. A small, dark part of me felt a flicker of intense satisfaction. But mostly, I just felt a profound, exhausting sadness. Sadness for the loving family I never actually had. I genuinely hope you all get the severe psychological help you need. I said, and I meant it. I hope Arthur's health improves, and I hope Marcus finally deals with his addiction before it kills him. But my money, my time, and my life are no longer resources for you to drain. Do not ever contact me again. Julian, please, she started, her voice breaking into a sob. Goodbye, Eleanor, I said softly, and I hung up. I immediately blocked her number. Then my dad's. Then Marcus's. I blocked them on every single social media platform. I blocked their email addresses. It was over. The final, rotting tether was violently cut. I stood in the middle of my living room. The silence was no longer heavy or unsettling. It was incredibly peaceful. It was the sound of a massive hurricane that had finally blown itself out. 6 months later, my world looked fundamentally different. Noah and I moved out of that apartment. We found a stunning, modern loft on the top floor of a building across town, far away from any memories of them. It has massive, floor-to-ceiling windows that flood the space with warm sunlight. We painted the walls, filled the space with expensive plants, and bought a dog, a golden retriever mix named Barnaby. It felt like a true home. It felt strictly like ours. My career had, to my absolute astonishment, skyrocketed into the stratosphere. The Sterling Vanguard contract was a massive, industry-recognized success. Word of mouth from Mr. Sterling led to 3 more massive corporate clients. I was so overwhelmed with high-paying work that I had to officially register as an LLC and hire 2 junior designers to help me manage the load. The income I was generating now made my old freelance salary look like absolute pocket change. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building an empire. But the absolute best part was the crushing piece. My phone no longer felt like a live hand grenade waiting to detonate in my pocket. A buzz was usually just Noah sending me a stupid TikTok or Aunt Vivian who had become a beloved, regular fixture in our lives inviting us over for Sunday dinner. The constant, suffocating, low-level anxiety that had been my shadow for 28 years was just evaporated. About a year after what I now lovingly refer to as the liberation, a physical letter arrived in the mail. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope. The return address was my parents' house. My father's shaky, deteriorating handwriting was on the front. My immediate instinct was to rip it into confetti and throw it in the trash. But morbid curiosity, and maybe a final, lingering thread of closure, made me slice it open. The letter was 5 pages long, written on cheap legal pad paper. It was not the angry, blustering, arrogant tirade I expected. It was something far more pathetic, a clumsy, rambling, desperate attempt at an apology. He wrote extensively about his own difficult, abusive childhood. He talked about how he saw Marcus's endless failures as his own, and how he'd been violently desperate to fix them, no matter who he had to crush to do it. He tried to explain away the barbecue comment, calling it a stupid, terrible joke fueled by too much beer. He never actually wrote the words, "I am sorry for abusing you." Instead, he used classic narcissist speak. "I regret how things turned out, and mistakes were clearly made on both sides." It was a non-apology full of justifications and blame shifting. But the last page was the most revealing. He wrote that Marcus had finally hit absolute rock bottom after I cut off the cash flow. Without my financial safety net to pay off the loan sharks, his debts had caught up to him in a terrifying, violent way. He'd lost his job, and Chloe had filed for divorce, taking their kid and moving out of state. Marcus was now in a strict, court-mandated inpatient rehab program. To pay for the rehab and the remaining loan shark debts, my mother was now working 2 minimum wage retail jobs, and they were in the final stages of foreclosing on the family house, the very house I had sacrificed my own savings to maintain for years. The letter ended with a tentative, pathetic plea: maybe when Marcus is finally clean, we can all sit down with a mediator and try to be a real family again. I read the letter twice. The Julian of 3 years ago would have been completely destroyed by it. He would have felt a massive, crushing surge of guilt. He would have immediately wired them $10,000, but I wasn't that Julian anymore. I felt a very distant, clinical pity for them. I felt a tiny flicker of hope that Marcus might actually get sober. But I felt absolutely zero guilt. I felt zero obligation. Their catastrophic ruin was the direct, mathematical result of their own malicious choices. I hadn't created their storm. I had simply refused to stand in the rain and drown with them any longer. I didn't write back. Any reply at all would be an invitation, a crack in the fortress door I had fought so hard to build. Silence was the only answer they deserved. I folded the letter, slid it back into its envelope, and walked over to a small wooden lockbox on my bookshelf. I placed the letter inside, next to Vivian's accordion file. I closed the lid and locked it. It wasn't a wound I was hiding, it was a battle scar I was proudly acknowledging. Then, I walked into the kitchen, where Noah was cooking dinner, wrapped my arms around his waist, and went back to my bright, sunny, incredibly peaceful life. I have never looked back.